Or were we?
No, we're pushing Rommel back now. The British were on the offensive, pushing the Germans.
Well, that was this. The offensive started on the 11th of October at 11 o'clock, you know.
What year?
1942. That was the first offensive. Well, after 3 days of bombardment and heavy gunfire, the Germans broke up, the line broke, and then after that they were on the retreat. Then we had to clear we've been with the engineers, we had to clear the minefields for the tanks. The minefields, we had to operate there and clear the minefields for the tanks to go through. You see the heavy tanks. So then we went on right through from there till places we had been before: Benghazi, Sousse, Tripoli. And
all the time chasing the Germans.
Aye, they were on the move, you see. They were just following them up, you know, once they got on the move, they used to stop in odd time and fire back, but they were on the move all the time, then on until they come to the Egyptian frontier. They did put up a small stand there, but then they were on the retreat all the time, so when we followed them on up through Libya and on until Tunis, and then right inside the Tunis border there they had the last line of defence in North Africa. They called it the Marth Line. Well, it was mostly Italians who was on the defences there on the hills above this line, you see. And then, of course, it was a long time after the Alamein, we got up there, it was March 1943, when they started the next offensive on the Marth Line, you see. It was the Italians were holding the line at that time, backed by the Germans. And then that heavy bombardment started again, you see, on the 20th of March, that was 1943. So after, that night at the bombardment, there was, how much we captured? About 3,000 Italians. They held the trenches in front of our lines, you see. And then when the infantry were done during the night, the Italians, they went up with fixed bayonets, and the Italians, they surrendered. So we took about 3,000 Italians and marched them back to behind the line, you see, and gave them over to the military police.
Was there ever any animosity towards them? Because your friends were being killed by them bombarding, so when you did capture them, were there any... did you give them any extra hardship or anything?
Oh God, no, there was no hardships. They just walked away like sheep, like the Italians. They seemed to be happy, you know, to be captured. Though they didn't.
I mean, on your part.
On our part.
Yeah. Were there any hardship? You know, you wanted to get in at them, or?
Oh well, the New Zealanders they did put it very stiff at them. Like we were in engineers, and the infantry they went up first, you see. And then the way the shell, the barrage, they start a barrage, you see, the fire in front of the Italian positions, you see. And then every 10 minutes or so, they elevate their guns, you see, and what's called a creeping barrage, you see. Well, then the Italians, that kept them. They were in big trenches in there, sandbags and all that. Carry on, you know. They were down there, and of course they'd be frightened too, you see, with that heavy barrage, you see. Oh, they didn't come out. But then our fellows went up the infantry, from we could hear them.
The British thing, who did they send in first? Were the Australians and the New Zealanders?
We were the first in there, the New Zealanders.
Well, why didn't the British troops go in first, the English ones?
Oh no, they were on the whole front was covered, you see. At Alamein, you see, the Aussies, they were on the coast road. They had their line, see, the Aussies, and then the Gurkhas, that's the Indian division, they were there, and that mixed them. And then the next was the Gordon Highlanders. They were in that section of the front, you see. And then we were in the next, New Zealanders, we were in the next line of defence. And then there was some British regiment. They were in the outer perimeter, you see. That was the front was 40 miles wide, you see, from the sea down to
Did you ever feel maybe that the British put yous in a more dangerous position than the rest of the other colonies, you could say?
Well, it was, they thought that at the start, you know, that they got the brunt of it, you know. Even at the first contact we had with the Germans, like, they took the brunt of it, the New Zealanders, like, they were good fighters, you know, good men, good infantrymen, you know. I would say that the parts of it, like they got the heaviest part of it to do, us and the Gurkhas, you know, the Indian divisions that was governed by the British officers, you know.
Yeah, so now that you have them in Tunis, were they pulling out in ships, the Germans, to Italy? Is that the route they were taking when they were backtracking?
Oh, well, once that Marth line had give up, you see, the Italians, they caved in there, you see, and we took them prisoners, you see. But from our position where we were, the infantry went up first, you see. These boys were still in the trenches, you see, and from we were, you could hear the New Zealanders, the infantry, come on out now, you Italian bastards. That was the language they were using to the Italians in the trenches. Come out, you Italian bastards, and fight. The Italians were in there, you see, and of course they were frightened to come out, you see, they were being shelled. The infantry was going behind the shell fire, you know. And then once the shell fire went over, you see, that's what the New Zealand infantry was calling to them. Come on out, you Italian bastards, and fight. Of course they were scared like the devil, you know. Well, eventually they did come out on their hunters and surrendered, you see, put up a white flag or whatever. And then they took them back. And then after that, like, that was inside Tunis. And then we went on then to a place they called Infidaville. That is about 20 miles from Tunis. Well, then the Germans, they were retreating, you see. Well, I think they got some of them away from Tunis, I think, but there were 250,000 Germans were captured before they got on the boats, you know, at Tunis, you see. Well, that was at the end of March or the 1st of April. Oh, it was a great country at that time in Tunis. These poppy trees, great poppies were, you know, passing through these poppy fields, you know, and through the desert there were a lovely countryside there.
Was it hard feeding all these prisoners? Was it hard feeding? I mean, you captured so many prisoners. Was it hard keeping them?
Oh no, well they got a grub enough to keep them going, anyway, keep them alive, you see. Well, some of them were sent to South Africa, you know, but most of them were kept in Egypt around Cairo there. But the Germans were sent to South Africa, you see, in prison camps. So then, like, we stopped at Infidaville there, almost in there about 12 days or so, and some of the boys got leave. Well, the Germans had surrendered. That was the thing. The war in Africa, if that finished it, the war in Africa was over. So the Germans had surrendered, and then the Yanks, they come in on the other side, you see, from Morocco, you see. That's where we met up with Americans in Tunis, you see. They had come in, they landed from Algiers or in there somewhere. They come down on the other coast, you see, and the Germans, they were penned in there, you see. They had nowhere to go, only home, or, you know, across the Mediterranean.
Then what was the next step in the war for you then?
Well, then, some of our boys got up till Tunis on leave this couple of days, but we didn't get. Some of them were drawn, you know, drawn for lots who would go there. And of course, when they come back, reorganise the transport, you see, back to Cairo, you see. So then when the transport was organised and they all got jacked up again, we come back on our own trucks from Tunis to Cairo, which is about 3,000 miles. Like, it took us 3 weeks travelling from Tunis to Cairo. We travelled by day and camped by night. Convoys and convoys and convoys of troops. You know, we had our own vehicles there, and we slept in them at night, and travelled during the day till we arrived back in Cairo to our own base again. Then, well, we started training there, and again, that was June, and July and August. We were at Cairo. And we were employed putting pontoon bridges across the Suez Canal.
Was there the weather affecting you at any?
No, it didn't affect us. No, well, not at that time. Like that, as the winter time there, it was cooler there. But like in in the desert there in the summer, like it was very hot. Flies and all that. They're the worst thing to put up with in desert sores, you know. If ever you got a scratch on your hand or face or anything, it come out with salt sores, you saw, and there wasn't much medical attention for it, just the ointment to put on there, but they broke out. If any scratch on your hand with this old fine dust, you see, it broke into sores. Well, 'cause there's a lot of casualties that way, you know.
So where did you go from Cairo then?
Then we stayed from June, July and August. We were building these bridges across the canal, just put them up and pick them down again and swimming about and knocking around, you know, had a good enough time. And then September were the British and Canadians, they landed in Sicily, see, and they captured Sicily, and then they'd crossed into the Italian mainland. So that's when we were again organised. We left Egypt or Cairo about sometime in the beginning of September, and went up to Alexandria on the coast there, and they put on ships. Then we landed in Taranto in the south of Italy, you know, the toe of Italy. Camped there for a couple of days, and then we went on up through. Well, the Germans, they were retreating across Italy at that time, but as they went, like they were blowing up all the bridges there, you see, and then being with the engineers, our job was to put up bailey bridges across these rivers that they're blowing the bridges off, you know. Then we landed up and went to Bari, Foggia, Naples. But
was most of this walking, or was it on convoy trucks?
Oh, we were in convoy trucks.
Uh-huh.
But then there was heavy machinery that come behind with these bridges, you see. Big, heavy gear. After a company in New Zealand, heavy transport, they shipped all this big, heavy bridges and stuff, you see. We had to put them up. And then they left them there for the transport to get through. As the Germans had retreated, you see, they blew up all the bridges and left booby traps and stuff on the roads, and a lot of our men got killed with it. They left booby traps along the roadside, you know. And I remember one day we were crossing a road. We had just went through with the mine sweepers, and we lifted the mines off the road, so you can pick up these mines with a sweeper. But then in this case, the Germans put a fly one across there. We had lifted the mine off the road all right, you see. And then we thought, the section that had done that part of the road, they lifted the mine off the road, you see. But then the Germans, they'd put a quick one across there. They put another mine down. They had a double mine, you see, on the road. So this mine, the road was supposed to be cleared, you see. As far as we knew, it was cleared, you see. But then the Germans, they had planted, in this part of the road, they had planted a double mine, you see. When that mine was lifted, we didn't know that there's another mine, with sand over the top of it, you see. And then as the trucks went over it, you see, it pressed on down till it come to the hard tack again. And our general had just passed over the road, General Freiberg. He was in an army truck, you see, and he had only just went over it about 10 minutes when this other truck come and hit the detonator on the top of this mine and blew it up. There was 3 men in the truck. And then we passed through, and one of the men, there was a tree on the side of the road, and the poor devil, he was put up, he was sitting on the top of the tree, and his 2 legs blown off, you know.
Still alive?
Oh no, he was dead. Like he had fired up out of the truck. The truck was blowing up clean off the road, and he was fired out of the turret of the thing, and he was sitting up on the trunk of a tree, you see. But the other 3 in it were killed, like.
During this time, were you getting much word from New Zealand, or how things were going in Ireland or New Zealand or anything?
Oh, not at that time, except you get an odd letter there or something. And we didn't know much.
How did you think the war was going for you at the time as you're going up through Italy?
Oh, well, we knew. Well, most of the men that was in the army at that time knew it was only a matter of time, you see. Well, you see, Italy had finished it before the war, you see, before we went there at all, you see. Italy was out of the war. It was only the Germans was in Italy, you see.
Oh, and you were chasing them back to Germany?
Chasing them back, yeah. The Italians had quit, you see, before we landed in Italy. But the Germans were holding on
Mm-hmm.
to them.
And
we got drawn up there to Foggia and Barry and Naples, and then we got down to. Then the next place was the last stronghold they had in Italy was Cassino, the Monte Cassino. You heard about that? It's a very high, big mountain, you see, and they blasted them for days and days. You see, these big, thick walls in this monastery, they were 11 feet wide, you know, stone built. So the Germans would go in, they were in there, you see, and they fought back. There were shells fired there day after day, and they were bombed night and day. And God, the next day the Germans would come out and fight back. You know, they were determined.
good fighters.
Good fighters. It was just the lack of transport and food, you see, to eventually they capitulated. Like after a siege, I think it lasted about 6 weeks.
Were you wounded then at that time?
Oh no, not at that time. But then after the Germans left Cassino, see, then we went to Rome. We got off a day in Rome. We visited 3 days off there. We visited the Pope. That was about the 29th of June, you see. And then we moved on way up the Lira Valley until Florence, you see. Oh, that was June. Then must have been July. We're going up into Florence, or camped this day just about 10 miles from Florence, and we were ordered to advance on up. Like, we could hear the gunfire on up, and we dug in for the night, and just sometimes early in the morning we got out of the trucks and was cooking some sausages for breakfast, and the Germans, they had dominated the hill right in front of us, and they started pumping shells into our area, you see, where we were camped. You see, there were trucks in there and everywhere, and there were shells dropping everywhere, and we dived for cover. I got under a big tank that was there, you see, and just, you know, there was other men under the tank too to take cover. But I only got my head in, you see, and then the shells were dropping around, and one of the shell splinters that caught me. My leg was out, you see. The shell dropped just across the field there for about 10 yards. The shell bursted 10 yards from we were lying under the tank, you see, and one of the splinters of the shell hit me in the knee, you see. Well, I didn't know I heard it stinging, but I didn't know at the time I was wounded. And then the shells stopped for a while, and then they started shelling again. And then these boys, the field dressing men, these ambulance men, they come around and they picked up whatever man was wounded, and they put us on a truck, you see. And we went crossing the road, just at the crossroads there, just in front of Florence. We were on one of these American jeeps, and the fellow was driving across this road, you see, and another shell landed just right beside his jeep, and he was sitting there on the driving seat in this old mirror on the side of the jeep. A big splinter of the shell just cut the mirror off at his nose. God says, we'll not get out of here, and we're slaughtered again. So at that time, the American Air Force, had an ambulance air corps there, you see, where you come to the dressing station there, behind the front line, they took you put you into this plane. It was a Douglas aircraft, I think it was. There were 6 of us put into this, wounded, you see, into this plane. That's for the service, like American Air Force, ambulance service it was, and then we were taken back to outside of Rome to the field hospital that was there. My knee wasn't so bad after about a week or so, like it was dressed up, and it was all right, you know.
Then back to the front lines?
No, we were finished. Well, at that time in the war, you see, any man in New Zealand Army that had done 3 years of service overseas, you see, he was taken back to New Zealand. There were other reinforcements to come to take our place, to replace, you see. We were finished with the war. Any man that was done 3 years in the North Africa and Italy, they were repatriated back to New Zealand, you see. So then I didn't have to go back there to the front. But then it was only a matter of days to Paddy McHugh and the rest of them come down. they had been taken back with the rest of us, and we've come back down to Toronto again and waited shipment for Egypt, back to home.
You at this time considered New Zealand home?
Hmm?
Did you consider New Zealand home now?
Oh, well, at that time I did. But then when I come back to Cairo, you see, I knew if the war was over, that was in September. Well, they knew it was only a matter of time. Of course, they had a good fight in Italy after that. They had to go up to, most of the boys that were up, they went up to Trieste. You see, that's where the Germans made their last stand, up there, like. But then we come back to Cairo, and then they were setting up a prisoner of war hostel in England, you see, in London, for the ones that are taken prisoners in North Africa and Italy, the time when they would come back from Germany, for repatriation, you see. And they were setting up a club in England. So then they asked for volunteers. Any man that wanted to go to London to this club, he was entitled to if he wanted to, you see. So I volunteered.
How come you didn't want to go back to New Zealand?
Well, I didn't want to go back at that time. I wanted to go home first, when I was in London, you see.
And where did the McHughes go?
Paddy went back from Egypt. He went back to New Zealand. That was optional, if you wanted to. Yeah. But if I had wanted, I could have went back there. And 6 months after it, they'd have taken me back, even after my term in London, you see, they'd taken me back to New Zealand free, you see, even though you were out of the army,
So what happened when you got to London?
Well, that was 45. Well, then that wound up the next year again, you see. Well, I didn't know whether to go back to New Zealand at the time or not, so then started this other thing up in Germany, the Control Commission.
Hey, what's that?
Well, it's a civilian occupation, of occupied Germany, you see. They could call for volunteers, to go to Germany, or they call it the CCG, Control Commission, Germany, you see. Well, it was civil administration, So
you volunteered for that?
I volunteered for that. I went over there, for 2 years over there.
What was your duties there?
Just driving.
What, transport goods or?
Oh no, we were mostly driving officials, CC officials, officers or whatever.
You weren't around with the Nuremberg trials were going on, were you?
We were in Nuremberg, but I wasn't there at the trials now. But we were at there's another trial there in Hereford, where a Belfast man was up for, he shot an Englishman there, you see.
What did that have to do? I mean, they were both in the same service, and the Belfast man shot the Englishman.
These men were in the same outfit as we were in, you see. It would have been a drunken brawl, This man who was Paddy Kennedy was in Belfast, you see, and he was a mechanic with us, and they lived in the same apartment, every man there apartment, and then if you were an officer in the CCG there and you had your wife there, you were entitled to a gun, you see, for your own protection. You were entitled to that. So it was a Christmas time anyway, and then there was these two English families that are living in this tenement out, they weren't agreeing, apparently they were. But so this boy from Belfast, he wasn't in the house at all, but he was a mate of this other Englishman that was there, and he went into this house drunk one night, and he went to force his way into this other man's premises, you see, and Paddy was a tough, small wee man. He knew he couldn't handle him in a fight, So he took out his gun and just shot him.
What was he sentenced to? Was he sentenced in Germany?
No, he was taken down. He was taken to prison down in Cologne, and then the trial didn't come off for about 3 weeks after that again. He got reprieved.
Why was that? Because of the circumstances?
Well, obviously there were 6 women there and 6 men on the jury, you see. And they come to the conclusion, I suppose, well, it was occupied territory he was in, you see, and then the position, well, he had a gun. Well, it was a lawfully held gun he had, you see. And apparently, like, where it happened in occupied country, you see, this looked at it in a different light, you see, that if it had happened in England, he wouldn't have got off. But then, you see, if you're in a home there and anybody attacks you in your own home, you're entitled to defend yourself, like against an attack. You see, so on that conditions, he got free. He was reprieved.
So, when your time was up in Germany, was that a contract that you had signed? Your year was up, and then you went back, or you just took it upon yourself to go back?
Oh no, you could. No, it wasn't a contract. Like you just signed up there, but you could quit any time you wanted to. Like.
So, what made you quit and come back?
Oh, then we come to Ireland to get married, and then I couldn't go back.
Yeah.
See, you wouldn't go.
You said before when you were in the army, the New Zealand army was sending back the £2 all the time to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Did you ever get that money?
Oh God, yes. Whenever they sent it here, whenever the war was over, like whenever I was demobbed, like they sent it over. Sure.
What did they call it? Demobbed?
You know, that's once you were demobbed. Once you finished with the army,
Mm-hmm.
That's demobilization. What did you call it?
We just got out. There was certain words, so it wasn't demobilization, demobbed, yeah.
Well, that's...
No, we were just short and we just got out. Yeah.
Oh, they sent the money, and then there's another thing you see in New Zealand there, you got gratuity.
From the country?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Once you sign up in New Zealand, from the first day that you signed up till you finished with the army, you got that's gratuity. They paid you 2 and 6pence a day. That's above your
for services rendered to the country.
Whatever it was, they called it gratuity. Like they give you 2 and 6pence a day from you joined up, like to the last day you finished with the army.
Did most of the young people in New Zealand join up?
Well, they had to.
Oh.
Well, the first men were called up would be single men without any,
Family.
you couldn't. Some jobs there in New Zealand, like you could be exempted from if you were a farmer or in some industry, shoemaking or something that was service to the war effort. Well, the first men we called up was all single men. And the next batch that we called up was married men with no children. The next two called, didn't they?
Well, I even read there, did you ever have a fear that New Zealand would be taken over by the Japanese? Because I remember reading somewhere that all the Australians and New Zealanders were fighting in the Middle East while the Japanese were coming in from behind and could have almost taken Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
That was the next step after Singapore.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever hear about that or feared that the...
Oh, we did, but they had organised some kind of a home guard in New Zealand, you see.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Philip.
But it couldn't have been much of anything. I would say most of the country's men were gone already.
Well, it wouldn't have... I don't think it was a great threat, but they prepared for it anyway. Like they had a home guard there and guard in the coast around New Zealand. I remember Philip McHugh saying that he was on that. He wasn't with the war, but they were on guard there around the coast, you see, in case the Japanese would. They were prepared to meet them. They did come, Oh, they sent to me all the medals that I was supposed to get. After the war.
Did they ever try to make you come back to New Zealand, like offer you land, say, you should come back and live here? You know what I mean?
Oh no, they never would. They
try to make it easy for you. I mean, just for
no, it's optional. Like if you wanted to go back,
Yeah.
I mean, you could go back. But there's no pressure on you.
No, well, I meant even say good pressure. Like say now you've done so much for us. If you do come back, we'll give you maybe a plot of land or something for what you've done for us.
Oh well, they did offer that to men that returned there, but according to Paddy, like it didn't amount to much. Like you'd have to battle your own.
Do you never went back to New Zealand? Just
no, I've never been there since.
You just did it at one time. This is good. I can just keep it like this all night. I won't get anything. What's today's date? Today's January 11th, 1984. I'm in Co.Fermanagh, occupied Ireland. That's very good. It seems you went from you got leave from Cairo to Palestine. Was it Palestine at the time, or was Israel?
Oh, Palestine, yeah.
Was there fighting going on there at the time?
Oh, no fighting in Palestine like it was neutral.
So what happened when you were in Palestine?
Oh, well, we visited the Dead Sea and Bethlehem.
You were on leave at the time?
That's the first time I was on leave, like we were down at the Dead Sea and Galilee, Nazareth, Jericho, and all of those places. That's the first time, and then the time the first time I was in the desert, like we got malaria. So
Where did you get the malaria?
in the desert. Then we were taken to transport to Cairo, and then from there we were sent it on to Palestine, to the Nazi hospital that was in there. Like they looked
What kind of Nazi?
Aussie.
Oh, an Aussie.
Australian hospital, you know, that they call them Aussies there, like, and they had a great big hospital there. About 3 weeks on that. Then we after got out of the hospital there, we got leave again, went into Jerusalem the second time, and went to Jericho. Oh yes, we were there one 1942. We were there on Christmas Eve in Bethlehem, you know, where the Mass was being celebrated, you know, on the 12 o'clock. And then up there, we're down in the cave, like where our Lord was born. You're down underneath there. Well, visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and all around there.
Well, I guess